Hello and welcome to the Lean on Agile show. I'm your host, Shaheen, and I have a dear friend of mine and dear coach and one of the most well-known ones that I know of, Jason Little with me. He doesn't need any introduction. Thanks, Jason, for showing up to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
That was a great intro.
Yeah.
Jeez, it's going to be hard to live up to that.
So tell us who Jason is for the people that might not know you.
Sure. Short version is I started my career as a developer. So if anybody remembers Cold Fusion or classic ASP, that's when I started my development career. So mid 90s, building web applications and things like that. And I got into the Agile stuff more out of necessity, I guess. The early 2000s, I was working for some startups. And if you are in Canada and you ever had, like a $5 ringtone on your phone back before the smartphone days, you probably got it from us. So that was one of the numerous startups. And all of those startups naturally worked in an agile way. We used ideas from Kanban and Scrum. We had no idea what any of that stuff was. We just limited our work in progress. We did a daily huddle every day, which it's the same as a stand-up. And we did retros every week where we would just go out for drinks on Friday for lunch and talk about how things were going and what we would want to do differently. And that was probably around the mid 2000s when I got involved with helping companies bring in agile practices. So I've been a product owner, been a scrum master, been a tester, internal coach, external coach. And the last decade or so has been focused on the organizational change aspect of Agile, I guess.
How do you compare the startup environment compared to these or big organizations that you work with? Are you missing those days?
Not really, because I am working for one now. So I am doing some side work for a startup where we are trying to solve the employment problem for people who are on the spectrum. So people with Asperger's and autism. So we have a platform that is helping people on the spectrum develop the skills and matching them to employers that are friendly to people who are on the spectrum. So I'm actually building their platform and doing some stuff. So I get to do some of that stuff. And I'm working with a Fortune 50 company right now as well. So it's interesting balancing the big thing with the small, more nimble thing.
Right. One thing that I noticed that you mentioned, and one of my previous guests mentioned, Mike Burrows, he was mentioning that he had the same kind of journey as yourself. He started in a startup and then he went into some large organization, but they were doing these agile stuff without knowing them, right? And then when he got out of that, he was like, oh my God, there are other processes that people are following and not doing the things that we were thinking about what to do, giving the teams work in progress, giving them autonomy, giving them self-empowerment to make decisions, right? Was that the same for you when you moved from the startup world to, as you said, as a product owner and tester to some larger organizations as well? Was that a culture change for you that you saw?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, it always depends on who you're working with. I've worked with marketing groups in enterprise organizations, and it's very much like a startup because marketing people just work that way already. So it's not too terribly different. And then, once you get into certain pockets, I find it's more true of industry and pockets as opposed to just, saying enterprise as a whole.
Right.
Like if you go into trying to work with a back-end billing team in a bank or a telecom, it's going to be very similar no matter what, because you're talking like there's severe consequences to mistakes. So you tend to get a more conservative, risk-averse culture. Things move very slow. It's very difficult to work in an agile way. So you kind of run into that bureaucratic red tape stuff that makes it difficult. But then in the same organization, I'll go over to a marketing team and it's completely opposite. So it's always
What's the worst thing that could happen with the marketing?
I almost got a marketing team in trouble once because we were doing some go-to-market thing, and we decided, well, instead of taking 2 weeks to do the fully polished marketing material and the collateral, let's do some wireframes and some mock-ups to at least convey the intent and get early feedback. And the leaders in that organization told the marketing, that the team that came to them, they said, don't ever come here with those again.
Oh, okay.
They wanted the fully polished thing. I was like, all right, sorry about that. But, early feedback is good, but I guess not so good in that context.
Yeah, you got them to the point of almost getting fired, but not fired. And that's a good influencer, as I learned. Yeah. So yeah, awesome. Yeah. And all these years of experience, not all of them, like it's still going on, like led to the lean change management and then the newer version, modern change management. So tell us a little bit about those as well.
The idea started percolating 2008-ish, I guess. And I was working in an enterprise on an agile transformation, and we're about 8 months in, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. Is you hit a point where just like, what is the point? Nobody gets this. Why doesn't anybody want to do this? It's so freaking easy. This agile stuff is not hard. I don't get it. And I just started thinking that there's got to be something about how we're doing this. Like, our approach is off. The timing is bad. Something's not just jiving right, but it's definitely not like a mindset problem or, some of these superficial things or something else going on. So that started the ideas of trying to figure out what's a better way to do change. Mm-hmm. So that was really a trigger for me to start thinking about Agile as just a trigger for change, like a reorg or implementation of a new system. It's just the trigger that starts the change. Right. It's not, the destination. And then when I read the Lean Startup book and went to the Lean Startup Machine in Toronto, which was hosted by Trevor Owens. I think they came to Toronto first, and there's a million of these now, but back then there was none of this existed. They ran the first Lean Startup weekend in Toronto, and my team won. And the goal was, you come in with an idea on Friday, you pitch your idea, you see who's interested, and you build your team. And the team who validates product market fit with the most evidence by Sunday wins. And we won. And I was like, holy cow, this is awesome. So that was the trigger of, how can we use the same idea and change? And that's really what it's all influenced by. And the lean part comes from mostly the dictionary definition of the word lean is as lightweight and as thin as possible as far as what your change process should be. Because I did find that generally speaking, this is not true in all cases, but when you've got a dedicated change team, a lot of the work is busy work, because change takes time. And sometimes when you're working on a change, you just have to wait for people to adopt it or for people to try things out. And it's a wait and see game a lot of the time. But we're always trying to do stuff because we have to justify why we're there. We can't just sit around for a week and wait for people to get it. So I found that there was always a lot of busy work that was very low value work. And the lean is, how can we stop doing that stuff? Like, how can we just focus on the stuff that actually makes an impact and not let following the process get in the way?
Would you elaborate or explore with us more? How did you come to the point that to focus on the change? Like, why didn't you focus on, for example, the development process or leanifying the process? Like, what was it important for the change to focus on from what your experience, what experience you had?
Two things. One was, I guess, dumb luck, if you want to call it that. So the organization where I ran into that wall after 8 months, and we just couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. The pilot team I was working with, when we started our pilot project, so we ran the first Scrum pilot in that organization. We had 5 developers, 2 testers, and I was the Scrum master / coach. And I just remember, transparency and courage being the values of Scrum. And we had like 25 different stakeholder groups who were providing input into the software we were doing. And I just went, all right, groovy. I'm going to invite all 25 of these groups to our first sprint review, because I guess that's what you're supposed to do. And they all showed up. And after the first sprint, it dropped off quite a bit. Like some people thought this was stupid. Like, why I'm in legal? Why do I have to be involved in this thing? And the corporate trainers kept showing up. So we realized that they were one of our biggest customers, because after we'd build the software in the old world, they'd throw it over the wall to the corporate trainers and they would go train the 10,000 people across Canada to use the software. And that really sucked. It was hard because, if we have a year-long project and then they have 3 months trying to figure it out and create their training material, then another 3 months of training people and doing the stuff, you've got a very, very long delay of value. So we actually incrementally started helping them create their training material. They became an input into our backlog because they were highly affected. And that trigger was, who's downstream from us that we should be working with closer? So open the door and give them the opportunity. If they don't think it's valuable, they don't have to keep coming back. And the people who come back, those are your more relevant stakeholders. So that was kind of the opening of the door to the whole greater enterprise. Disciplined Agile delivery calls this being enterprise aware. And back then, especially back then, there wasn't a lot of this talk going on in the Agile community. It was very protect the team mentality. Like the Scrum team is the only thing that matters. And like, well, this is, an 80,000 person organization. There's a little bit more to it than that. So it was those things that just thought, okay, we're doing something that is going to have a ripple effect outwards. We need to at least understand where these ripples might be, and we need to make connections with those people.
Right.
Yeah.
Prior to that, how would that process, I might know the answer to that, but I want to hear it from you. Prior to this kind of process that you might have introduced as a lean change management, who would have taken care of those in a large organization like that?
Probably the official change team. So we would have had to, invoke the organizational development or the change management team, and we would have to go into their process to figure out how they're going to go change those other groups and stuff, which might work in some cases, but it's very long and slow. So, you have to find where the connection points are to the greater organization and who owns those connections and how do we engage with them. And it would have been a mess. So we just started doing it directly. Yeah.
Right. In part of the organization that I was working in, one of the large organizations that you were working as well, one of these green organizations in Toronto, we had coaches and change management folks as well. So on a team, they were working together, on an organization level, they were working together. And it was nice to see that part of the Lean Change Management Association that I'm part of, and you are heading that, we are providing some training. And it was very nice to see that the change management folks were joining these Lean Change Management training. So it has propagated so much, and you have done multiple workshops around the world with change management people, right? That they are seeing the value of this and coming to hear what you have to say, which is amazing. And that's after, I guess, 5 years and how many workshops, it led to the next iteration of that is modern change management, right?
Yeah, about 100 and 140 or so, I think. Workshops, and that doesn't include all the intervention style coaching and consulting and
these are the public workshops.
Yeah, public, and probably another 50, 60 private on top of that too. The modern change thing was interesting because I wanted to see if there was a pattern about how people were getting stuck and what was getting them unstuck, because the more I would travel and talk to people and work in organizations and train people, the problems were the same. It really, it didn't matter what country or what company or whatever. It's like what Jerry Weinberg said, right? Whatever the problem is, it's always a people problem. And it turned out that there were companies that were having success with change sort of aligned to these five patterns, right? They focused more on creating purpose and aligning people around a common cause or a purpose instead of, just creating urgency. Like we're the leaders. It's urgent for all of you to change, but we're not going to change. Like that rarely works. But companies that did it the opposite way, where it was focused on purpose and people could really get behind what a strategy or an objective was, that was working well. So it was just 5 short patterns. One of them being companies that really focused on good, meaningful dialogue instead of just broadcasting, because a lot of the times change communications is broadcasting. It's like turning on the TV set and plunking people down in front of it and filling their head with ideas, and then you check the box on your project. But companies that were really willing to do lean coffees and open spaces and encourage hard questions were getting things to work. The third being experimentation. And I might as well I'll say the last 2 just to get through the 5. Experimentation over just blindly following the plan. Co-creating over creating it yourself and selling it to people. And understanding how people are reacting to change as opposed to blaming them for resisting.
Right. And you have worked throughout the organization as you said earlier in your career, as a Scrum Master, as a developer, up to the leadership, I believe. And you have heard the stories that even you fired your client as well. So tell us, which part of the organization you feel more comfortable and even more challenging to work with? What are the stories that you can share with us?
Oh, there's tons. It's tough. Actually, just before we recorded this, I just finished a session with a senior leadership team in a Fortune 50 organization. And it was unbelievable. I mean, I think there's a lot. You can go on LinkedIn now and you find all these things about how leaders are the problem and they don't support it and they don't get it. And from my experience, it's usually the exact opposite. It's people don't take time to understand the amount of pressure these folks are under, and their intent is good. I have very rarely, if ever, come across bad intent at that level. It might manifest itself in a toxic way because of the environment, but when you really get into the meaningful conversations, like we were talking about trust and team agreements and stuff, I think especially when you're, agile coach or change person at the team level, you kind of forget that they're people too, just like the rest of us. So, the energy of this session was off the charts, and the amount of how do we figure out how to do the right things and how do we get better at coalescing our objectives together and, knowing everything that's affected by these programs we want to do and stop competing and duplicating work and all this stuff. The intent was just fantastic. Some of the worst stories are more just, sometimes cultures just evolve to be toxic because they just do, right? We tolerate certain things. The one organization, people were yelling at each other out in the floor. Like the first day, actually, I walked into the area where I was going to be working, and there was one person just screaming at their team. And I thought, they're probably just having a bad day, no big deal. And then over time, a couple people in my program went on sick leave. You're talking testers are up till 3 a.m. writing Agile test cases because they hired a different Agile testing consulting firm to do stuff. And it was not a good environment. And when we reflected that back to the leaders, that was the client that we fired that you mentioned. We had some pretty ugly conversations with them, but they were surprised. They had all the other consultancy firms come in with the nice diagrams and the PowerPoints about how great things were going to be and how Agile was going to fix everything. But they never had anybody come in and actually tell them what was going on. And we were the first to say, just open the door. Like, look out there. People are not happy. They're miserable. So we can't fix that with a process. We went up 3 levels in the organization, and then they spent 2 years getting leadership coaching, top to bottom in that whole division. I actually ran into the Scrum Master that I worked with originally a couple of years later at the train station in Toronto. And he's like, I don't know what you guys did, but it seems like it's gotten better over the last little bit. Yeah. So
He was brave enough to stay with that organization for that period of journey, right?
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, even in some sprint planning sessions with that team, there was such a big rift between the business folks, like the BAs on the business side versus the BAs on the IT side, where if when they would bring the stories to the team would start asking questions. They would literally say, I'm not answering that. You didn't read the effing document. Like it was that, and that was the norm. That was just the way they worked. And I'm sitting there going, this doesn't seem very healthy, but that's just the norm for them. And if that's tolerated, that's what led to that toxic culture. And we just finally had to reflect it back. Yeah.
Right. What was the saying? The culture is the worst behavior that your leader let happen in the organization, something like that. If you're the leaders is letting those things happen, like if the culture is propagating through the team, right? And I was lucky in one case. I had an SVP that his motto was, we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And whenever we were putting like VPs and directors in an uncomfortable position, we would just refer to that, like, hey, your SVP said such a thing, you're uncomfortable, right? Go and like very implicitly go and talk to your SVP, right? So, but if you don't have anything from the top level that helps you, it's going to be very hard to drive with change or even influence change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jason, so the book Modern Change Management has came out. What is next after that? Like, is there a sequel to it? Like, is there a third one that is coming up next that you can tell us?
Yeah, there is. It's going to be based on the 5 universals and the 52 philosophies. And the thing on top of it is I like books because they're a nice point in time. Right. About thoughts about a point in time, but it lives on with the new community portal that we're going to be launching pretty soon, which is like, the problems are very similar. I guarantee there's somebody in the world that's had the same problem you've had as a change agent, and this is going to be like the dating service, so you can help find them and you can help find ways to intervene in the organizational system. So there's going to be a whole bunch of tools and stories and elements and tidbits and things to hopefully help people figure out how to get things unstuck.
Right. And now that you mentioned the community website, there are case studies that people can go and read those. And even if you are a change agent that you use any of these tools, you can contribute as a case. You don't have to be a certified or a trained part of lean change management, right? If you just use a lean coffee to help with your change, you can do that. And it's a good I still have two scenarios to contribute. It's still on my plate, but it's a very good place to go and dig around. You have a self-paced study as well, that if they want to take the training on their own, they can go there and take that training. Yeah. So what is do you picked the name of the book yet?
I am not. The phrase exceptional change has been bouncing around in my head for a while.
Okay.
And the core of it is really, we put so much emphasis on the process and the framework and the models, but we forget, like, even some of the big change vendors, they go, yes, we're a people focused solution, here's the templates you need to get people to fill out. And I'm like, that's completely incongruent. If we're people first, then we're not just shoving a bunch of templates without context in front of people and doing surveys and stuff. So it's exceptional change agents know how to balance the art and the science. The process and the tools and the ideas are important, but so is our attitude as change agents and our temperament and our character traits and stuff. All of that factors in. I've worked with coaches who are certified up the yin yang, and they come in with a team to teach them how to use Kanban, and they create the Kanban for the team and tell them how they're going to work. And they create swim lanes with the team members' names on it, and they assign the work. And I'm like, that's 100% opposite of what it is. So it's not, and that's just their temperament, right? They value order and structure. They're super duper smart. I'm not saying they're that they're a bad person or anything. I'm just saying their view of I am responsible for how the team improves, I am responsible for creating the structure, is what is making the change emerge in a way that is more structured and ordered, as opposed to somebody who's got a temperament of being more of a helper will come at it from a coaching stance or a coaching mindset and try to understand the problems first and co-create with the team. And we discount that a lot. We think if we just follow the process, everything will work, but we forget about ourselves as humans. So this is all about balancing all of those things.
And you mentioned change agents. Tell us more, who are the change agents in the environment that we work? Are there specific people that are called change management people, or everyone would be considered, or a selected people when they're referring to change?
It's everybody who wants to do something different. Right. When I was working as a professional services manager, we had our customer support people were using tool number one, our 2 development teams, each of them were using their own tool. And when I'm trying to consolidate and capture this information about customer requests and everything, I've got 3 systems to deal with, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I brought everybody together in a session, and I said, here's a problem I have. I know this isn't a problem for all y'all. This is something I want to try to make it easier to just kind of manage all this stuff, because it's hard for me to keep things together when the 3 of us kind of work on similar things, but we're all in different tools. Here's some suggestions. What do you guys think? And we co-created that together. So in that case, I was the change agent, but I was just the professional services manager. Developers who want to switch to a different source control system, they become agents of change, because that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to change something. So I think I'm not a fan of the, everybody is responsible for change. It's a little too loose, because if everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible, right? Like you see these awesome little clickbaity things on LinkedIn where, successful transformation happens when everyone is involved, and it gets 5 million shares and likes. And I'm going, oh, come on. Go to a company like Bosch that has 430,000 employees. Do you really think all 430,000 are co-creating change like one big? No. So it's an interesting conversation to have, but for me, the change agent is the one who wants to do something different, and then it's their responsibility to understand what they're disturbing in the organization and how they co-create that. Most of the people I work with are actually not coaches or change agents. They're regular day-to-day managers, team members that want to do something different. And the change community, and to an extent the Agile community, tries to make things sound overly complicated with the models and the tools and stuff. So I find those ones are the ones that really want to make a difference, because they're invested in the outcome.
Right.
And
and it could be because they have learned it in a complex way as well, like because they were in the change environment or Agile domain, they learned it from a very complicated process and complex domain. They learned it that way, they wanted to implement, versus a person that, like yourself as a manager, get people together, like, let's talk about this one, as easy as that, as simple as that, and then let's just get to an agreement. Like, and that could be like a kind of a lean coffee, that session that you run, right? What we want to talk about, this is a suggestion. Are you guys agreeing? If you are agreeing, just join this session. We talk about this, get something out of it, and move on, right? Yeah. So this is the same as I like that you mentioned the clickbait. Like, everyone is a leader, right? So and the leadership is everyone's responsibility, right? But it's to some extent and some perspective, you need to be specific about what you want to lead and what you want to change, right? So
because some people don't want that.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I've worked on teams, one of the first Scrum teams I worked on with the 5 developers and 2 testers. We had two of the developers were, I guess if you put them in a box, they're the 9 to 5ers, right? They come in at 9, they leave at 5 every day. They're never sick. They're always there. They're rock solid. They're dependable. There are 5 tasks they need to finish, and they will always finish them on time in perfect quality. We had 2 people like that. They're never going to be the people that want to step up and lead, because that's that. And somehow we go, well, you have to, be a leader, or you have to be whatever. And some people are just fine being team members and just contributing stuff. They don't want to be a leader. They don't want to do all these other things. And the opposite is true too. You get some people that are thrown into leadership positions because they're the best developer on a team and they suck at being a manager because they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first job that I had in Canada. It was with SAP, or at that time it was Business Objects that SAP bought them in Vancouver. And I met the team, and there was one person on the team that he was there for the longest. I saw his books, and there was reference books on QBasic and like at his desk, and he was like all gray hair, and I was like, oh my God, what happened to him that he didn't get promoted? And my assumption was that if you are good at what you do, you get promoted to become a manager. You could become to a team lead. But after I get to know the team and I understood him, he was like, no, I was offered to become promoted, but I liked to code for my living, and that's what I do. I do that the best. So some of the assumptions that we are making is not always true. Like we are making assumptions based on our own version of things, right? So yeah, and some people are not there for the change. Like they want to be told, like they have their mindset, I'm going 9 to 5 doing this job. But if they are people that let's talk it this way, like the people that didn't want things to change for them, right? Change is the constant. Change is always a constant. So this past two years showed that there's a change that you cannot oversee that, right? Or ignore it, and the pandemic, right? So change is eventually is going to happen to you, right? No matter how you want it or not, right? And these tools, if you have at your disposal, like it's going to help you at least deal with the change. Have you had any stories of that people use these tools maybe after the pandemic and it helped them, like with the lean change management cycle, with experiment and that, or
yeah, actually this a client I'm working with now, they have a very long change cycle. So they have basically 6 months of planning, and then the changes kind of get dropped into the other part of the organization, and then 6 months to execute on the change. And we started a pilot. They're calling it change agility instead of lean change, because change agility is a nice word and it sounds good to them. And we did some personas, change canvas, started an experiment board, started working on the change. 2 weeks later, they did a reorg. And now we looked at all the experiments that were in progress. So what of this is still relevant? What doesn't matter anymore? And what should we do next? And we agreed as a department, we're going to wait and see. That was one of the options. We've had them plotted all on the whiteboard, the virtual whiteboard. And we think it'd be better if we just waited until the dust settled from the reorg before we take any more actions. But we did that within 2 weeks. Normally, they would have spent months planning the entire change project out. We spent maybe a week doing a canvas and an experiment board. So they saved a ton of time of just by using lighter weight tools.
Right. Jason, I always, not always, but typically ask these questions. What it comes to mind when you hear elevate change?
Breaking the status quo, and not breaking status quo about how to do change, right? Not the actual change itself, but getting away from this. Let's assess, analyze, plan, execute, close down. Let's elevate that to a new paradigm.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that the right answer?
It's always the right answer. It's comfortable. I just want to hear what people are thinking when they hear elevate change, because I was going through lots of weeks of figuring out what to call my name and what is the purpose of my organization or incorporation. And I came up with this one. Some people like it, some people find it confusing, and but it's good to hear that. So Jason, for the people that want, obviously lean change management, the community website is there, they can learn more. But if they want to broaden their scope and their horizon, you mentioned late Jerry Weinberg. Who else, or what other books, or what other like tools or any resources that you recommend people to read and study upon? Is there anything that coming to your mind?
Yeah, Becoming a Change Artist by Jerry Weinberg. Are Your Lights On, which is Don Gause and Jerry Weinberg, is another great one. I'm very heavily influenced by the Satir ecosystem. So learning about Virginia Satir's work. Those are probably the big three. As far as organizational change, I think one of the best courses I ever took was MIT's Leading Organizational Change. And MIT's in the boat of many of us where they're like, you can't certify people in this. So it's not a certification course, which is probably why people haven't heard of it, because everybody wants, but it's right. But it was probably head and shoulders one of the best courses I've ever taken, because it really distills the things that matter about big organizational change. But yeah, I would say anything from Jerry Weinberg, because he wrote about all this Agile stuff in the 60s. Right. The Psychology of Computer Programming, the Secrets of Consulting, editions 1 and 2. Yeah, those are probably my go-to ones. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about and we haven't covered? Anything that is worth mentioning?
I think I guess noticing the pattern over the pandemic was a lot of change people that I knew and worked with that were working in, large organizations. Plenty of them left. Like the pandemic was a way for them to step back and go, am I really making the best use of my talent, helping this billion-dollar corporation make an extra few bucks by optimizing their processes? And if that's what you want to do, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is I talked to quite a few people that used it as an opportunity to move more towards work that was fulfilled their purpose. So they would go to different organizations or go to nonprofits or something else. So I think the pandemic has shown us that we can work with anyone from anywhere doing anything. And people who feel stuck in their current jobs, you've got choice. Yeah.
The nature of choice has become different, like because you're working remotely, it could be any place around the world, and you're at the same time you're then competing with other people from around the world. But there are lots of options there, right? The talent pool is becoming global, and finding that purpose is not easy, right? Some people, let me put it this way: knowing your purpose could be. I don't want to say it's a luxury in life, but it's not a given, right? Sometimes, like in the third world country that you're living, or the countries that you're waking up to make sure that you get to the end of the day, like your purpose might not be there, and you're just making sure that you can live the day, the next week, the next month, the next year, right? But getting to a point that you can think about the purpose, that's advantage that you have. And if you haven't thought about your purpose in life, you should. How do you get people that started thinking about their purpose if they haven't?
There is a really good book, a doodle book from Adriana Girdler, who we had her at Spark. I don't think I have it here. It's a really small book that you can just doodle in, and the whole book is about exploring your purpose. That's a great one. I think it's a tough one. I don't know. Try to become aware of the last coach I had. She said as you're walking through life, there's all these silver threads in front of you. You just have to develop enough awareness to know which one to pull on. So when you think about it that way, there's some seed that you plant in your head that you're going to be more aware of
Right.
Events you can grab onto to find what that is.
Right. I think becoming self-aware like that's the first skill that one needs to develop, right? Like that in any form or shape. If you want to understand your purpose, find that purpose, or even improve yourself, improve the way that you're being presented, like you're showing up, right? Because I have gone through that. I wasn't self-aware, and it was the first thing that I had to do. Maybe I start from there. And the book that you mentioned, we are going to put that book in the link in the podcast description and podcast notes. I think I have a copy of that book. If it was a short book, I'm not sure if it has an ISBN on it or not. So I'm not sure if it's like you can find it on Amazon or anything like that. But obviously, contacting the writer, you can get that. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you want us to put on the show notes? How people might get in contact with you? Obviously, we are going to put the community website there.
Yeah. I think the last is thatchainshow.com. So I started doing a podcast and video cast from all the workshops and lean coffees over the last 8 to 10 years, because I have pictures of these on sticky. I used to have all the sticky notes, like a gigantic stack of all of these questions, and now I've got them all digital. And every week it's a 10 to 15 minute take a question from a workshop or from a lean coffee and provide some insights into, if you've got the same problem, here's what you might want to try to get unstuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. That Change Show.
Thatchainshow.com.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason, for spending the time with me. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Hopefully we have you again on the show sometime soon.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks for the invite.